Right. So are you ready to dive into something kind of fascinating today?
Yeah, bring it on.
Okay, well, today we're going to be looking into this phenomenon of Apple hate.
Oh, okay.
But we're not, just talking about people disliking Apple products.
Right.
We really want to understand why some people have these intense, almost like visceral reactions to Apple as a company.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's like this undercurrent of really strong emotions, that you pick up on whenever Apple is even mentioned.
Yeah, exactly.
And it really does make you stop and think about the deeper connections people have with technology these days and how much our devices can kind of become intertwined with our sense of self.
It's so true.
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we're going to be checking out an article called "Why Does Apple Inspire So Much Hate?"
Okay.
It was published on Rich Candies, and it's got some really thought-provoking points on how this hate has actually evolved over time, what's been fueling it, and even some psychological insights into why it runs so deep.
Interesting.
You ready to unpack this?
Let's get into it.
All right. So the article starts off by comparing what they call the pro-Apple haters of the past to the anti-Apple haters of the mobile era.
Okay.
And it seems like the focus of the hate has kind of shifted.
Yeah.
So back in the day, it was all about the rivalry with Windows.
Right. And that makes total sense if you think about, Apple's journey. They were the underdog back then, battling against this giant corporation.
Yeah.
So, a lot of that hate was probably coming from Windows users who, I don't know, maybe felt threatened by Apple's growing fan base or, even a little defensive about their own tech choices. It's that classic us versus them thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like Coke and Pepsi.
Exactly.
But with computers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then things really changed.
Right.
As Apple gained momentum. Especially, with the iPhone and the iPad. They went from this niche brand to this mainstream powerhouse.
Exactly. And I think that shift in market position actually played a huge role in this evolution of hate.
Yeah.
So as Apple became the giant, the resentment grew.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about defending another company anymore.
Yeah.
It was about criticizing Apple itself for becoming what they once rallied against.
Yeah.
Almost like a betrayal of their, their original underdog spirit.
It's interesting how that selling out perception can really turn some fans away. But the article says it wasn't just about Apple's change in status. They point to a few other things that really fanned the flames, starting with
what they call the 3Gs.
The 3Gs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first G is Google.
Okay.
As a direct competitor with Android.
Right. Right.
So this gave people a viable alternative to iOS, which attracted, a whole new wave of passionate fans.
Yeah, whole new wave.
And naturally, that rivalry between Android and iOS just intensified those feelings of, us versus them.
Definitely.
And led to, some pretty strong opinions.
Sure.
Both positive and negative.
Yeah.
So, okay, competition breeds strong feelings.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What's the second G?
Well, the second G is Google as a target.
Okay.
So the article talks about how Apple took some pretty aggressive actions against Google, dropping their services from Apple devices and those, high-profile patent lawsuits.
Right. It went beyond just healthy competition.
Yeah.
It became like a battle for
it was a power struggle.
dominance.
Yes, for sure.
And finally, the third G.
The third G is Google+.
Okay.
Especially in its early days.
Okay.
The article kind of describes it as this breeding ground for this anti-Apple sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes you think about the role of these online communities and how they can amplify certain biases.
Sure.
It's like
birds of a feather flock together or something.
Yeah, exactly. You find people who share your views, and those views suddenly become even stronger. The internet can create these echo chambers.
Oh, absolutely.
Where, criticism, even if it starts small, can snowball into something much bigger.
For sure. I mean, and that's something we see play out in so many areas of life now.
It's true.
Not just tech.
Right.
But the article goes on to say that it wasn't all about Google.
Okay.
They point to a few other factors.
that contributed to this anti-Apple sentiment.
Okay.
One is the decline of Microsoft.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so as Microsoft started to kind of lose its grip on the tech landscape, you know, some of those longtime Windows users might have felt a sense of, I don't know, loss or even resentment as Apple rose to prominence.
Like a bit of nostalgia.
Yeah, totally.
For the good old days.
Yeah, maybe even a little fear of change, you know?
Right.
Driving those negative feelings towards Apple.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The article also mentions open source advocates who are pushing for a more open and collaborative tech future. And that makes sense because Apple's whole approach with its closed ecosystem, the tight control over its software and hardware that goes against the grain of that open source philosophy.
Hey, for sure, for people who value that flexibility and customization.
Yeah. Apple's our way or the highway approach can feel incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
They see it as like stifling innovation and limiting user choice.
Right.
You know, it clashes with their fundamental beliefs about how technology should work. It's like a philosophical difference almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got Google, Microsoft, the open source movement, all feeding into this complex picture of Apple hate.
Right.
But the article doesn't stop there. It actually dives into like the psychology behind these strong feelings. And that's where things get really interesting.
It is fascinating.
Right.
The article suggests that a lot of this this intensity, both the love and the hate, directed at Apple, you know, it comes from how deeply people engage with their products.
Yeah.
You know, like think about it. Our devices aren't just tools anymore. They're like extensions of ourselves, reflections of our personalities and values.
It's so true. We pour so much time, money, energy into our tech.
Yeah.
It's no wonder it feels personal.
It is personal.
Right.
It's like if someone criticizes your taste in music or your favorite author, you're going to get a little defensive.
Yeah, for sure.
And that sense of personal investment, I think it's magnified even more by the fact that Apple has been so successful at building this strong brand identity.
Right.
They're not just selling products anymore. They're selling a lifestyle, a sense of belonging to this community of like-minded individuals.
It's like those iconic Apple ads.
Oh, yeah.
Right. With the silhouettes and like the catchy music.
Yeah.
They weren't just selling a product. They were selling
the feeling.
An attitude.
Exactly.
And for some people, that really resonates.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Apple has tapped into something powerful. This desire to be a part of something bigger than yourself.
To express your individuality through the products you choose.
That's so true. And you see that play out in other areas too, right? Like fashion music.
Oh, totally.
We use these things to signal who we are to the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like choosing your team in the big game of tech.
Exactly.
You're either Team Apple or Team Not Apple, and you wear your colors proudly.
Yeah, and you wear them proudly.
But the article also talks about how the context in which we use technology really shapes perceptions of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, someone who sees their devices primarily as tools to tinker with, you know, to customize and push the boundaries, they might find Apple's restrictions incredibly frustrating.
For sure.
But someone who prioritizes ease of use, you know, that it just works mentality, they might totally appreciate Apple's approach.
Absolutely.
It all depends.
Yeah. On your individual needs and expectations.
It's like what might be seen as a flaw by one person is a feature for another.
Exactly. It's all relative. Right. Like those optical illusions.
Totally, yeah.
Where the same image can be seen in two completely different ways.
Yes.
And, you know, it brings up this fascinating point that the article mentioned, this concept of bias blind spots.
Okay.
So we tend to overlook flaws in the systems that we're familiar with. While being super critical of unfamiliar ones.
The familiarity breeds contempt.
Well, yeah, but in this case, it's more like familiarity breeds tolerance for the flaws we know, while anything new and different gets scrutinized.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like we can get used to the quirks of our own car.
Exactly. But the moment we drive a rental, every little rattle and squeak just
drives us crazy.
And you see this in tech all the time. Yeah. People who are like deeply embedded in the Apple ecosystem, they might not even notice the limitations you know?
Yeah.
But someone coming from a different platform might find those same limitations infuriating.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's where that sense of injustice comes in.
Right.
The article argues that both Apple fans and haters see unfairness in the tech landscape. Apple fans might point to blatant copying of Apple's designs or business practices as evidence that they're not getting their due respect. While haters might focus on what they perceive as Apple's undeserved success or their control over the app market.
Right. It's like this classic he said, she said, where each side feels wronged.
Totally.
And that fuels the passion, whether it's love or hate.
Right. So it becomes less about the technology itself and more about like defending your chosen tribe.
Right. Yeah.
And its values.
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting how our tech choices can become so intertwined with our sense of identity and belonging.
Yeah, it's not just about specs and features anymore.
It's not. It's about aligning yourself with.
Yeah, it's about aligning yourself with
a certain set of values and a particular vision of the future.
With the future.
And let's not forget the role of marketing.
Oh, right.
In shaping these perceptions.
For sure.
Apple has a long history of bold, sometimes polarizing ad campaigns.
Yeah.
Like, think different.
Right.
I'm a Mac.
Yeah.
On the one hand, they were celebrating creativity and individuality.
Right.
But on the other hand, they could also be interpreted as elitist.
A little elitist.
Even insulting to those who didn't choose Apple?
Yeah, like if you're not with us, you're not cool.
You're not cool.
You're not innovative.
You're not innovative.
And that kind of messaging can create a backlash.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially from people who feel excluded or marginalized.
And I think it speaks to a larger point that the article makes.
Okay.
These intense emotions, both the love and the hate, they often stem from the same root.
What's that?
Passion.
Passion. Okay.
As the author points out, the true opposite of love and hate isn't hate.
What is it then?
It's indifference.
Wow, that's really insightful.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe all this hate, in a strange way, is actually like a testament to Apple's impact and the deep emotions they evoke in people. It's like you can't truly hate something unless you've also loved it.
Yeah.
Or at least cared about it deeply at some point.
Right.
Right.
Indifference suggests that you just don't care enough.
Exactly.
To even have an opinion.
You're just apathetic.
Yeah, exactly.
But to feel such strong emotions, whether positive or negative, means that you're engaged.
Yeah.
You're invested.
You're part of the conversation.
You're part of the conversation.
Yeah.
So to bring it back to our listeners, I'm curious, where do you fall on this spectrum of love and hate?
Good question.
For Apple.
Yeah.
Have you experienced those intense feelings?
Right.
Or are you somewhere in between?
Yeah.
What aspects of Apple's products or philosophy resonate with you?
Yeah.
And what concerns do you have?
Yeah. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
Share your experiences with us, and let's continue this conversation.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
As we've been looking at this whole Apple hate thing, it really shows how much tech is part of our lives these days.
It does.
It's not just about iPhones and MacBooks.
Right.
It's really about our values.
Totally.
Our identities. How we see ourselves in this digital world.
It's like Apple becomes this lightning rod for all these anxieties and aspirations.
That we have about technology.
Yeah, and that's what makes this so interesting to me. Yeah. Because whether you love Apple, hate Apple, or fall somewhere in between, it seems like we're all dealing with these bigger questions.
We are.
Right.
And the article touches on something I think is super important here.
Okay, what's that?
This idea that understanding the why behind these strong emotions, both the love and the hate, can actually be incredibly valuable.
How so?
Well, because we talked about how these feelings are often rooted in, you know, deep-seated values and beliefs and personal experiences.
Okay.
And if we recognize that, I think we can move beyond just like the superficial arguments and actually engage in more meaningful conversations.
So instead of just like yelling, Apple's the best or Apple's the worst.
Right.
We can actually try to understand
where those opinions are coming from.
Exactly. We can start asking questions like, what is it about Apple that you love?
Okay.
You know, or what are your concerns?
Mm-hmm.
What experiences have shaped those concerns?
Yeah.
And by digging a little deeper,
right.
I think we might find some common ground, even in our disagreements.
It's like shifting from this battle of us versus them to a genuine exploration of different perspectives.
For sure. And that can lead to some really cool insights, not just about Apple, but about technology's impact on our lives.
Like we zoom out, see the bigger picture.
The bigger picture.
And we start to realize that these debates about tech are often a reflection of deeper societal anxieties and aspirations.
Yeah, for sure.
And that shift in perspective can be incredibly empowering.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it allows us to move beyond just reacting to the latest product release or marketing campaign and start to think critically about how we engage with technology.
So in a way, even this hate, when approached with curiosity and empathy, can be a catalyst for positive change.
Totally.
It can push us to question our own assumptions, to have those tough conversations, and ultimately to make more informed choices, as consumers and citizens.
Yeah, it's like iron sharpens iron or whatever. You know, those opposing viewpoints, when expressed respectfully and thoughtfully, can actually help us all learn and grow.
So to our listeners, we challenge you to kind of go beyond the surface level. Look past the fanboyism and the hate and engage in these deeper conversations about technology and its impact on our world.
Our world,
Ask questions, challenge your own assumptions, and be open to learning from people who hold different views.
Totally. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Yeah, you never know. And maybe through these conversations, we could find ways to bridge these digital divides and create a more inclusive tech future.
A more inclusive future.
Yeah, for everybody. Yeah. So that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of
Apple hate.
Apple hate.
IDT.
We covered a lot today.
We did.
From the history to the psychology, all the complex factors.
It's complex. But before we go, we want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay, shoot.
If, as we've been talking about, our passions for technology, even in their extreme forms, reflect our deep engagement with the world around us.
What does that really say?
Yeah, good question.
Us as humans in this digital age, are we becoming more connected or more divided? More empowered or more controlled?
Yeah.
The answer is yours to explore.
That's a good one.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
And we hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to keep exploring this complex and fascinating world of technology.
It is a fascinating world.
Until next time, keep diving deep.